Bailey, I am ready to get hurt again. Guess what I have for you?
Get hurt again. Are you actually asking me this time?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. You get what hint did you give me?
That's right. Another plane crash.
Oh no.
Just as terrifying and harrowing as those before it. Sit back, try to relax, and fasten your seatbelt as I recount the disastrous landing of United Airlines Flight 232.
I think I know where this is going.
Oh, it's a disaster.
I'm so intrigued.
Just wait, it gets worse.
We are just the masters of disasters, aren't we?
Calamity Janes. Welcome to Calamity Janes, the weekly disaster podcast hosted by me, Madison.
And me, Bailey.
And we're going to talk all about disaster. Do you want to do the anything but plain? Okay, sorry. I didn't know if I skipped a little bit.
No.
I did it on the fly. I let my heart lead me.
They don't have to know we're anything but plain Janes. It's fine.
Where to? Anything but plain Janes. Read you stories of disaster. Calamity. Got it.
I'm Bailey.
Oh my God. Okay, here we go. On July 19th, 1989, United Airlines Flight 232 departed from Denver and began to make its way to Chicago O'Hare. The aircraft, a DC-10, was captained by Alfred Haynes, with Bill Records serving as co-pilot. Why are you shaking your head?
Those DC-10s. Those DC-10s.
Yeah, I know.
Major problems.
Yeah, so many problems. Bill Records was serving as co-pilot and Dudley Dvorak as flight engineer. All three men had extensive flying experience and knew DC-10s very well. There were 285 passengers and 11 crew aboard. Coincidentally, United was having a Children's Day ticket promotion where each child's seat was only 1 cent. So 52 of those passengers were children, including 4 lap children.
No.
Yeah, I know, man.
No.
This is not going to be fun.
You don't say. You don't say.
Yeah. I didn't realize quite how horrendous this was. This was a listener request. And
who did this?
I don't know, I couldn't find it.
Well, thank you for the suggestion, but actually maybe don't, because this sounds really...
This was a really good suggestion. It's just, well, what plane crash is fun, you know?
The one where there are survivors?
Well, we haven't done... Well, yeah, there's... Okay. Just
okay.
Please.
Okay.
Flight 232 took off at 2:09 p.m. and for 1 hour and 7 minutes flew peacefully through the clear, sunny skies on its way to Chicago. After beginning a right turn at 37,000 feet to establish a heading for Chicago, the number 2 engine mounted in the tail violently explodes.
Oh, not... Okay.
Yeah.
Not what I was expecting.
So this plane has 2 wing-mounted engines and an engine mounted in the tail.
Got it.
Just unlike the 2 wing-mounted engines plus 2 kind of on the back.
Right, just the one on the back.
Yes, just so everyone is aware.
Okay.
Passengers and crew heard a bang and felt shaking as the engine's fan disc ripped apart the aircraft's hydraulic system and supply hoses.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. I think that's a chronic problem with DC-10s.
Oh, yes, it is. There is a reason they are not flown anymore.
Yeah.
In an instant, the autopilot disengaged. In the 14 seconds immediately following the explosion, First Officer Records grabs his control column and Captain Haynes discovers that the throttle and fuel supply to the tail engine are kaput.
So they can't speed up?
They can't do anything.
Oh, okay. They are literally gliding.
Yeah. Flight engineer Dvorak cuts fuel to the tail engine. The hydraulic fluid drains and essentially eliminates the crew's ability to steer the plane.
Oh, because it probably disabled if they even had that little flap on the back. They've lost their ability to, like, what is it? It's like yaw or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And if you, with an aircraft, well, any commercial aircraft, but especially one as big as a DC-10, which holds several hundred people, hydraulics are very important. Hydraulics are what allows you to steer the plane with your controls.
Yeah. Were all hydraulics out or just the one to
All.
that flap? Oh,
Yes.
so no wing flaps. Not even the back wing.
They had
none.
absolutely nothing. So the fluid drains and eliminates the crew's ability to steer the plane. The aircraft rolls dramatically to the right. 2 minutes after the explosion, Captain Haynes discovers that if he throttles up on the right engine and down on the left, he can just barely maintain some control over the plane. And by some control, I mean keep it. So if it had continued to bank to the right like that, it would have inverted. And that's not a recoverable position for a plane to be in. So he was able to keep it from from inverting.
Yes.
And kept it in just like a slight bank.
A slight bank.
A slight bank. So it's continuing to bank, but only a few degrees.
It's not a dramatic.
No.
Okay.
This isn't.
But they are just now going around in circles.
Yes.
Ideally with the nose not pointed dramatically down.
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, although Captain Haynes has a teeny tiny semblance of control over the aircraft, the crew is still very much in the troubleshooting phase.
Sure.
They contact United maintenance personnel over the radio and are told that there are no procedures for what they are experiencing because a total loss of hydraulics on this particular aircraft was considered virtually impossible.
Which is ironic given that was like a chronic, not chronic, but like of the ways that aircraft failed.
Yes.
Tended to be it.
Exactly. It's also at this point that the aircraft starts to experience what is called a phugoid cycle. A phugoid cycle is where an aircraft pitches up and climbs and then pitches down and descends.
Okay.
This happens because the aircraft experiences significant engine loss and as a result, a loss in airspeed.
Oh. And so I would have expected a loss of airspeed to just lead to progressive rapid decline, but
okay, so yes. So, and it's not like they're immediately losing all that speed. A plane level can glide for a very long time without engine power. So when the aircraft began to lose airspeed, though, after the engine failed, it would pitch down and actually start to speed up, which created lift and would point the nose upwards.
This makes sense. Okay.
This happened cyclically after the explosion, and each time that it did, the aircraft lost about 1,500 feet or 460 meters.
Over the course of how much time?
We're getting to that with how long this takes. So does that make sense, though, what that cycle is like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just like a wave motion.
Do you have to have like great control of the plane? I'm imagining that you do have to have great control of the plane for that to happen, because to me it would seem very easy to, as you're progressively picking up speed on your descent, if you don't know the appropriate time or way to pull up, you could just keep going down.
It's like you were there, Bailey.
I really am trying to put myself in the pilot's shoes, because
I would not recommend doing that. That's going to be very stressful for you.
It is, but the fact that he's thinking so coolly, it seems like to go through this scenario that even the manufacturer is like, yeah, that's not supposed to happen, so we have no plan A for you, let alone a plan B or C.
Yeah.
And he's like, I figured out with this trick, I can play my engines off of each other and like keep this bird in the air for longer than 5 seconds. Like, that to me is incredible.
Well, yeah, it absolutely is. It's kind of a miracle that he figured it out really quickly, what turned out to be the only trick to keeping them in the air.
Yeah, that is just like, wow, good for him.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It's also important to understand exactly where the plane is going now. So with the explosion and immediate sharp right turn right after that, the plane made a wide right turn that was 20 miles in diameter.
Okay, so these are big circles.
Yes. So all throughout these phugoid cycles where they're going up and down and the crew's attempts to keep the plane from losing complete control, the plane is still turning. They're continuing to make turns at 5 to 10 miles in diameter.
Okay.
So in the show notes are a couple of articles that I used for this. One of them has a diagram that shows you. It like shows the flight path, like once the engine exploded. And it looks kind of like if you drew the circle or the like wind direction of a tornado, it kind of looks like that. Like if you threw a paper airplane out, that's exactly what happens. Is like this. The fugoid cycles, and then no.
I don't.
lose you there.
Not my
I
paper
was never
airplanes.
okay.
My paper airplanes go right into the ground, so that's probably not the
Yours
best
and mine
visualization for me. Yeah, I don't know how to build paper airplanes.
But okay, so all you really need to know is we're continuing to go in circles.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot we can do about that except to keep from going in really, really tight circles that flip us upside down. And we're continuing to go up and down, and we lose 1,500 feet every time we do. And that happens every couple of minutes.
Okay, so it's over the course of minutes. It's almost as good as a vomit comet is what I'm hearing. Like the parabolas of the
basic. Yes, it's a parabolic shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
In a stroke of incredible luck, there was a very helpful passenger aboard Flight 232 that day, Dennis Fitch, who happened to be a DC-10 flight instructor at the at the United Training Facility, was on his way back home for the weekend.
And he's like, I'm off the clock.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah, so he's just there as a passenger. No one on the plane knows who he is or his credentials. So at this point, passengers had been notified that they lost an engine right after it happened because there was an audible explosion and shaking. But they didn't know that hydraulics were lost. And also that information probably wouldn't have been as impactful to most passengers.
Yeah.
So when Fitch saw a flight attendant trying to conceal her panic on a trip back from the cockpit, he stopped her and tried to calm her down by saying, "Don't worry, this thing flies totally fine on 2 engines." The flight attendant quietly responded that the engines weren't the problem and that there were in fact no hydraulics.
Did he jump out of his seat and run to the cockpit?
Fitch told her that that was impossible and then asked her to notify the captain that he was on board and what his job was. Very quickly after that, he was taken to the cockpit where he took note of the palpable tension in the air. There was no panicking, but it was obvious that no one in the cockpit felt optimistic about the situation.
I mean, does he? I mean...
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he walked in hoping to be able to tell them something they didn't already know about the airplane.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
I mean, I know, I'm sure he's incredibly experienced, but I don't know, something about like walking into an active situation where, tensions are high, thinking that like they wouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah. So he pretty immediately figured out that he had absolutely nothing to add to that situation. So he was...
Well, that's disheartening. I thought you were going to tell me and he saves the day.
Well, no, he is very helpful. But like I said, he was hoping to walk in there and tell them,
flip this switch.
Yeah, exactly. I know this plane up and down. Let me tell you what will help.
Yeah.
And they were happy to have him. He was happy to help. But the captain later said he walked in and took one look at the control panel and realized that was it. That was the extent of his knowledge.
Oh, no. So you said he's a flight instructor?
Yes. For DC-10s.
Okay, for DC-10s.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
With United, too. So he was sent to observe the ailerons through a passenger cabin window to see if the cruise controls were actually doing anything.
Okay.
They were not.
Oh.
Fitch then went back to the cockpit to assist with handling the control columns, a task that required great physical strength. Because without hydraulics, they are...
manually flying the plane.
Yeah.
Which they can still do. I guess I didn't even think about that. You're just out of computer and the helpful things. But you could... Okay.
So thankfully they still have communications, and it's a sunny day, which really helps with a lot of things. But
sure.
Yeah, when you can't steer an airplane, especially an airplane that size.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Through communication with air traffic control, an emergency landing was arranged for the Sioux Gateway Airport in Sioux City, Iowa. So at this point, the main objective had gone from keeping the plane from banking so hard that it flips upside down to maintaining some control to now actually landing the dang thing.
Which, great to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, kudos for that.
Yeah.
Gold star just for that to get to that point.
It's incredible that they made it that far. The crew wasn't sure whether or not to deploy the landing gear because, again, without hydraulics, they couldn't do that.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
I didn't even think.
Yeah.
It takes out all of the pressure in the hydraulic lines.
Yes.
That did not occur to me.
Yeah. They ultimately decided that the gear would absorb some shock on impact, but because there were no hydraulics, they had to manually lower the gear through a lever in the cockpit.
Oh, they have a lever. That's
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Fitch actually did that. He lowered it.
That's good.
Yeah. So that was good.
Is that is it as hard as steering to manually do that, or it's just
No,
like-
I mean, I think it was really inconvenient and not fun,
okay.
but no,
Okay.
it does not require these sustained. Well, because it sounded like from what I read, you have to do like a small motion and then gravity, they're obviously very heavy. Gravity pulls them down and kind of locks them in place in that situation.
Gotcha.
So that helped them. So thankfully, I mean, they kind of panicked. Well, they didn't panic. They were worried for a moment about whether or not the landing gear would actually deploy. Thankfully, it did.
I hope all modern day planes still have that feature because
really?
sometimes things are like even our cars are so computerized that sometimes I worry like, am I manually driving this car or is this a computer?
Now for the really challenging part. The plane was originally given clearance to land on 9,000-foot runway 31 at the Sioux Gateway Airport. However, because of all of these right-hand turns the plane was making, lining up for that runway was now impossible. Instead, they were now somewhat in line with the 6,888-foot runway 22, which was a World War II era runway that had been permanently closed a year earlier.
Closed because it was not suitable.
Yes.
I mean, because that means it hadn't been maintained. I'm like, because a year is it's recent enough where you're like, oh, how bad can it be?
Yeah, I don't think they were landing DC-10s on it.
Probably not. That's probably a heavier plane, and who knows how much maintenance goes on in a year? But with overgrowth and
it looked like
to a runway.
The concrete was cracked and it was overgrown, and there was a big yellow X painted at the front of it saying, "Don't go here, do not enter."
Yeah. No zone.
All of the emergency vehicles had actually been lined up on that runway, and when the plan changed last minute, they were all very quickly evacuated.
I was going to say they were all staged right on that. Oh my God.
A nearby highway had also been cleared, but as soon as they told Captain Haynes that you could land on this highway, he was like, well, just past it. So, nope. Can't do that.
Like when you miss your exit. Nope.
Yeah,
no, I can't.
exactly.
I cannot land on that one.
Yeah. Now,
you can land on a they can clear highways?
I don't think it was that busy at that point, but yeah, I think they had people, I think they said, this highway is there. If you think this is an option, let us know. And I think they had people all around trying to figure out what was going to happen, like where they could possibly land. Because he, at one point, was saying, when it was actually like, oh my gosh, we're still in the air. We're actually trying to plan a landing. We don't know if it'll happen, but we're trying to plan for one. And he said he was being obviously very professional and cool as a cucumber the whole time, but at one point said, just get us away from the city. Just don't let us crash somewhere with a lot of people. Thankfully, in the area around the Sioux Gateway Airport is all cornfields.
As is the case for many airports in the Midwest, regional airports in the Midwest.
Yes, exactly. Now, when landing aircraft, two of the most important things to be able to control are airspeed and sink rate. You want to control how fast you're going forward and how quickly you're going down. Without hydraulics, you can't deploy those handy little flaps on the wings, which happen to control both of those things.
Of course.
So when the aircraft was approaching the landing spot, it was going 410 kilometers an hour with a sink rate of 1,850 feet per minute.
Also, what about the brakes?
Yeah, that is also something that you don't get to control.
Okay.
So a safe landing would have been 260 kilometers an hour with a 300 foot per minute sink rate. So again, we're going 410 kilometers per hour should be 260, with a sink rate of 1850 that should be 300.
1850. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's a lot. That is a lot of force on your landing gear.
Oh boy, is it.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to the cabin for a quick moment. Remember how I said there was a special on children's tickets that day?
I sure do. That put my stomach right up into my
You and me
yeah,
both.
heart.
Well, while the crew was doing everything in their power to control the aircraft and think of any possible way to get onto the ground in one piece, the flight attendants were walking the cabin, trying to figure out how to protect the babies. Before the final approach, as I put in air quotes, Captain Haines announced to the passengers that they would be attempting an emergency landing and that before they made contact with the ground, a crew member would shout, "Brace," 3 times, and that would be their cue. He concluded by saying, "This is going to be the roughest landing you've ever had."
I guess what else do you say to people who you're like, how do I prepare you for how extreme this is going to be without scaring you so that you can still think clearly and not be like out of your mind with panic?
Yeah. Personally, every time I've been in a plane and a pilot has announced something like that, obviously not to this degree, but has announced...
How many times has that been?
I would say about 4 or 5 times I've been in a plane where a pilot has announced, "We're going to experience severe turbulence. Please take your seats." That has happened to me more times than I would like. Obviously not to this degree. I'm not claiming that.
But okay, does the pilot actually say severe turbulence, or is he like, really?
Yes!
Oh my god. Man, you have the worst luck with...
I'm not making it up.
I don't think you're making it up, but I do think that you are very afraid of flying, and so I am just curious if maybe severe is a word that you add on when you hear it, especially in your memory.
I don't think I want to tell you the rest of the story.
I need to know the ending. You have to. That's the deal.
Okay. The flight attendants, against literally anyone's instincts, instructed parents of lap children, so children who were sitting in their parents' lap, didn't have an actual seat, to place them on the floor.
What?
Yeah. Like a bag.
Yeah, under the seat. And that is...
I think it was protocol. I think...
What else are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Despite the unimaginable fear and anxiety, the cabin fell completely silent, and the passengers tried to prepare for what might come next.
What else are you going to do? I mean, you could panic, but...
What good does that do anyone?
It's, these situations are not always about logic. It defies the laws of logic. You never know.
A few minutes later, Captain Haines announced to the passengers that there were 4 minutes to touchdown. With runway 22 miraculously in line with the aircraft's path in view of it just ahead.
And this is still the World War II?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was a surge of hope in the cockpit. With 112 seconds until touchdown, air traffic control said, "United 232 Heavy, the wind's currently 360 at 11, 360 at 11. You're cleared to land on any runway." Captain Haines laughed and replied, "You want to be particular and make it a runway?" For a few minutes, the tension was eased, and those on the ground thought that the flight was as good as landed. There was hope, laughter, albeit nervous, but they had made it so much further than anyone would have anticipated given the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. You're about to break my heart, aren't you?
Shh, it'll be okay.
Okay.
At 400 feet, Captain Haines noticed the excessive airspeed and sink rate, and out of fear of an explosive landing, he firewalled both engines. The left engine went to 96% power, while the right only reached 66%. At less than 100 feet above the ground, the right wing went from a bank of 2 degrees to more than 20. In less than a second, the right wing ripped through the runway, leaving an 18-inch deep scar through the old concrete. The plane slammed into the ground. The number 2 engine, along with the tail, snapped off and tumbled in one direction. The left engine, still going strong, causes the plane to rotate over and over.
Rotate in...
like horizontally.
Like a cartwheel?
No.
Oh.
Like...
not like the other disaster. Like,
no.
Like a spinning like a top.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay.
Here's a quote from Fitch. "When the tail broke off, the airplane is much heavier forward. So the airplane is now coming up in the air like a seesaw that somebody got off of. And the cockpit is getting pointed straight into the earth. And we skip like a pogo stick. The first skip, when I saw the windshield go dark brown and green, we were still integral to the aircraft. But the second skip, the stress caused the cockpit to break off like a pencil tip.
And is he in the cockpit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he, once, he had deployed the landing gear, and he was there still offering his assistance for anything they could need. Because, again, controlling the plane to the degree that they were able to was exhausting.
Right.
So he was trying to help hold control panels, or the control sticks and, or columns is what they're called. Control columns. Anyways, so as they get closer, he's doing the same thing. He buckles in some of the pilots. He finds his own seat in the cockpit. Thankfully, they had a seat for him there, so he...
Flying jump. He's like in that little jump seat.
Yeah. So he's still in the cockpit.
Okay.
A fireball engulfed a large portion of the cabin as seats were catapulted out of the fuselage. The hope that had begun to occupy the control tower evaporated into abject horror. The controller who'd been guiding Flight 232 collapsed to the ground after witnessing the crash. Despite thinking no one could have possibly survived such a grisly scene, rescuers raced to the wreckage. Here's a quote from one rescuer. "We just sat there looking at all these dead people, and the most surreal thing I've ever seen in my life happened next. It actually looked like something from Night of the Living Dead, because many of these bodies all of a sudden started sitting up."
What?
Of the 296 people on board, Bailey, only 112 died.
Stop. I mean, that's
that's not a small
incredibly
number.
high number, but it wasn't a total fatality.
All four of the crew, including Fitch, survived and fully recovered. I feel like you almost never hear about pilots surviving.
No, especially when the cockpit broke off into its own little projectile.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, the plane sounds like it broke apart into a million little pieces.
Yeah, well, and this, compared to the Dallas crash that we talked about, the actual crash of it sounds a lot more violent.
Yes.
And I'm shocked that those are the numbers that we're seeing. The one rescuer said that when he started to see people sit up, kind of in shock, one businessman stood up, found his luggage, and left. Just left.
That's the kind of stuff where it's like your body does things that make sense, like in a logical, like in your brain, but in the context of the situation, you're like, no.
Yeah. There's a lot of blunt force trauma, smoke inhalation, and so that was a lot of it. It was...
I can't believe it.
I know.
I cannot believe it.
The NTSB later determined that the probable cause of the accident was inadequate, this is what they say, inadequate consideration given to human factors and limitations in inspection and quality control procedures used by United's engine overhaul facility. Now, when I read that, the first couple of words really made me upset because it makes it sound like the people in the plane did something wrong, which is not true.
No.
What it came down, that's a lot of words just to say there was a fatigue crack in a critical area of the titanium alloy stage 1 fan disc that went undetected and resulted in an uncontrolled engine failure.
And they're suggesting that it was due to lack of oversight on the maintenance people's.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Why don't they say that?
I know. It's...
Okay.
Yeah. So we had talked about this with the Aloha Airlines flight. Fatigue cracks, metal fatigues, especially when it's heated up and cooled and like planes are fired up multiple times every day for a very, very long time. A very small crack doesn't take, over time, will get much, much bigger.
And when just things are moving that fast,
yes.
It's like things that go wrong are amplified, magnified. Yeah.
And they found, this was a little over my head for part of it. Any NTSB report is readily available to the public. So if plane crash reports really set your heart on fire, you can always find those. But another big problem with that is that because the failure in the engine was uncontained, shrapnel flew off and cut lines for the hydraulic fluid, which was ultimately the biggest issue. And in later, they did modify some DC-10s to keep that from happening. So if a line is compromised, it's not the entire line. But again, that's not the only problem the DC-10 had.
Yeah. Well, and I'm trying to remember in that disaster book that I've recommended in previous episodes called Inviting Disaster, there's I think multiple DC-10 disasters because like a major vulnerability in the design is the fact that those lines run through the belly.
Yeah.
Like right through the belly. And so like say in one disaster, it's you put all of your checked bags down there. And so if you have something like compressed air that explodes like a gas canister and it explodes under the plane, it takes out all of this critical infrastructure in your plane.
There are lots of reasons why the DC-10 is not flown anymore.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. During the NTSB investigation, there were many reconstructions of the accident in flight simulators, like they usually do. Not a single expert was able to get anything even remotely as successful as this result.
Like, when you say simulators, do they model it on a computer or do they, like, literally fly it in a...
These are on computers.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha. Well, no. I mean, not fly it in a plane, but, like, they upload it to a simulator that a pilot then flies. Like, when you're training
they were doing
pilots.
That.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. It's not like you put it in your computer, you hit run, and the computer does it for you. These are like actual pilots who are trying to recreate.
Yeah. From what I read, that was my understanding, is that these were flight simulators.
Wow.
And there were no survivable landings, and most never even made it to a landing scenario. They all like inverted or banked so hard that something else happened, and yeah. So, as a result of this crash, newer aircraft now have hydraulic fuses that isolate a compromised section to prevent a total loss of hydraulics, like Flight 232.
Great. So, obviously newer than 1989.
Yeah.
Assuming they didn't, like, retrofit a bunch of... I wonder... I will forever look at my planes that I'm on now and be like, when were you built?
Yeah, that is for sure. So that is the disastrous flight of 232.
That is incredible. I did not see any of it coming. I mean, when you hear about like such a disaster of that magnitude in the sky, it's immediate. Your mind goes to the worst. And not that this wasn't, horrific.
Oh, yeah.
With all of the casualties. But again, to not be... The fact that it didn't just become a lead weight in the air the second that happened is like incredible.
The fact that they didn't just immediately, oh my gosh,
plummet.
Yeah, is insane. Those crew members are, wow, just absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And the guy who helped out and passengers who were calm, cool, and collected.
Yes, absolutely. And from what I saw, a very large portion of the children survived.
Good.
Yes, I know. Yeah, anything having to do with children is mostly a no-go zone for me, but the rest of the story was too good.
Yeah, too incredible. Too mind-boggling. Wow. Well, thank you to whoever suggested this. So sorry, Madison.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We are going to keep better track of who requests these.
Bailey will do a better job in the future.
I will do a better job. Yes, thank you. Thanks for throwing me under the bus. This is a team effort.
So that's all she wrote.
Well, thank you, Moo. This was a very harrowing discussion. Did I use that right? Acutely distressing. Yes. This was an acutely distressing retelling of this disaster, but...
That sure was. I live to
that's where we're here.
Set you on edge.
Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished this time around. Well, thank you. And thank you to our best friends who tune in every week or whenever you can. We appreciate it.
Heck yeah, we do. Thank you for listening this week. We've so enjoyed our time together with you.
In your ears.
All right, sign us out, boo.
That's all from Calamity Janes. We'll catch you next. What do you mean sign us out? We don't have like a sign.
don't
Do we need
know.
a sign out? No, we don't have a sign off.
Okay.
But you know what? If anybody else has ideas for a sign off, please let us know. Email us. Our email, along with show notes, and everything else you might need to or want to know about us, is always in the show notes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.